Are you wondering which cards to grab from Pokemon's newest set, Surging Sparks? Well, today we're breaking down the essentials that you'll want to pick up, including staple cards that can instantly boost any deck's competitive edge, new deck archetypes coming out, and even exciting upgrades that'll give your current list a big power boost. We'll also be looking at versatile tech cards worth adding to your collection for some very unique game-changing plays, and for those who love experimenting, we've even got picks that could shake up the meta, but are a little bit more on the rogue side. We won't just be sticking to the standard format though, as we'll even be giving insights into cards that'll be great for alternate formats like Gym Leader Challenge and my own budget build battles format, with tournaments every Friday night if you're interested. That's enough yapping though, let's kick things off with the must-have staple cards for you to add to your collection. The first one we're going to talk about is Gastrodon. Its ability Sticky Bind makes it so that as long as this is on your bench stage 2 Pokemon don't have any abilities. This applies to yours and your opponents. The reason I'm saying this is a staple is Duskmar is seeing a lot of play currently in the meta, and it's a stage 2. It can knock itself out and put 13 damage counters onto one of your Pokemon, and by having Gastrodon in play, you're effectively saying you need to put your Duskmar into the active in some way to be able to use its ability. Of course, they'd be able to knock it out and knock out Gastrodon with it, but it makes them work a little bit harder. You're also going to be shutting down things like Gardevoir EX, Baxcalibur, Pidgeot EX, so it's definitely a great card to be adding to your collection. And I'll be honest, I think this is pretty much it for the staple cards from this set. There's a lot of really unique things, but this is the one card that I'd say could just flat out go into any list and give it a big boost in competitive play. So I'm just going to say pick up at least a 1/1 line of the Gastrodon. Realistically, probably go ahead and grab yourself 2 copies of these though, just to be on the safe side. The next cards we're going to cover are the new decks coming out of the set. So first up being Pikachu EX, it's pretty much just a deck in the entire set. Like, you get everything you need from this set, aside from staple cards that are already in the standard format. Its ability Resolute Heart makes it so if it's at full health, if someone tries to knock you out, you go down to 10 HP remaining instead of being knocked out. So it's a pretty solid tank. The attack on here doing 300 damage, Topaz Bolt, you need a Grass, Lightning, and Steel. A little bit awkward to pay for, but we've got a card coming up in 1 second that'll help you out with that. You do have to discard these 3 energy when you do the attack, but you're doing 300 damage, so you're pretty good. Add some sort of damage modifier, or the new Stadium Gravity Mountain, reducing stage 2 Pokemon's HP by 30, and effectively you're doing 330, taking out a Dragapult or Charizard EX, so yeah, Pikachu seems like a pretty solid powerhouse for the format. Combining this with Magneton, you can knock it out with Overvolt Discharge. Once during your turn, you can attach 3 basic energy from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon in any way that you'd like. So that's how you're going to be paying for that Pikachu, and it's basically, yeah, like I said, a deck out of the set. The other one we're going to talk about is Ceruledge EX. The attack on here, Abysmal Flames, does 30 base damage, then 20 more damage for each energy card in your discard pile. So you can quickly ramp up the damage output of this, just run high counts of energy. You're probably looking at like 18 to 20 in the deck. So let's say you have 20 theoretically in there. Best case scenario, you have 1 fire energy attached to this, 19 in the discard pile. 19 times 2 is what, 380 plus 30, 410? That's a big number. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit tricky to get to that point, but it's one of those things like mid to late game, you should be able to take one-shots even into stage 2 EX Pokemon. The other deck coming out of the set is Hydreigon EX. Hydreigon, Hydreigon. It's kind of up to you how you say it. I usually say Hydreigon. Kind of got chewed out in the comments on the video I did about the deck list, but yeah, is what it is. The attack on here though, Crashing Headbutt, does 200 base damage and discards the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Having ways to boost this up, theoretically like a Binding Mochi, combining it with Petrant, you can get up to 240 to take out things like Raging Bolt EX in one shot. And it combos very nicely with Duskmar as well, because it does 200 damage, knock out a Duskmar, does 130. You can knock out a Charizard EX, ideally in one go with that combo, while milling their deck, making it so they might be losing key pieces they need to get back into the match. The second attack on there though, Obsidian, does 130 base damage, then does 130 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Be mindful, Manaphy and Terra Pokemon will block this, but still it's pretty solid, especially if you use Crashing Headbutt doing 200, then followed up with Obsidian. That'll also get you to that 330 breakpoint, so you don't even need the Duskmar to be knocking out like a Charizard in 2 shots while also taking out things on their bench. So yeah, seems like a really solid deck, and I'm honestly really keen to try it out when it releases. The other one, Slacking EX, seems like it has great potential. The ability on here, Born to Slack, you can only attack with this if your opponent has an EX or V Pokemon in play, but like for the most part, most decks are running those. If you run into a single prize matchup, you might be having a bit of a tricky time, but just have some backup attackers and you'll be fine. The attack on here, Great Swing, does 280 damage for 2 colorless energy, so you could easily pay this with a DTE, 1 attachment, you're ready to go, or some other energy accelerations, something like Matang or maybe Baxcalibur just to rush them out, or even like a Crispin. Just Crispin gets 1 energy to this, then manually attach the other one and you're going. The nice thing about 280, you're one-shotting V-Star Pokemon, and with a maximum belt, you're getting up to 330, taking out a Charizard EX. Yeah, not too bad. You could also combine this with Binding Mochi and like Brute Bonnet. So Brute Bonnet would poison this, Binding Mochi boosts your damage output by 40, you get up to 320, you're taking out a Dragapult EX, and because you used the Brute Bonnet, you're poisoning their Dragapult. Between turns, they take 10 damage from being poisoned, goes up to 330. So into Charizard EX, you're also taking a one-shot in that way too. So yeah, Slacking definitely seems like it has some solid potential. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for the new decks coming out of this set. Obviously, you would need the pre-evolutions for them. So we've got the Magnemite, the Charcadet, the Dino, the Zweilous, the Slakoth, and Vigoroth, but that's pretty much it. There is some other rogue decks coming out of here that could be worth looking into, but for the most part, yeah, I'll be honest, like, as fun as some of the rogue decks do seem, they're that, right? They're rogue decks. These are the ones that do seem like out of the box, they're going to be competitively viable. Now, for the cards that are going to be great upgrades for current decks, we have Magneton. We did just mention it with the Pikachu as a new deck coming out of the set, but it's also a great upgrade for just current Lightning decks. Like combining this with Miraidon, you're not as dependent on like Electric Generator. That can fail. Magneton won't. Magneton just goes, hey, there's lightning in the discard pile. Cool, knock me out, you can have it, get going. So definitely a great addition for Miraidon and just other lightning decks you're trying to make work. Also, Koraidon coming out in this set. So Unrelenting Onslaught does 30 base damage, but if one of your other ancient Pokemon used an attack on the last turn, 150 more, getting up to 180. It's fighting types, you're hitting weakness into Terrapagos and most lightning things like Iron Hands, Iron Thorns, probably missing a couple in here that it's also helpful in, but the main idea of this is it's boosting up your ancient decks. So things like Roaring Moon, or just a straight up ancient box, or Raging Bolt. Also gives them a single prize attacking option, so if your opponent tries to wall you with Mimikyu, well, you got a way to deal with that now. And the other one we're going to talk about is Brilliant Blender. You get to search your deck for 5 cards and discard them. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So this is a great upgrade for Gardevoir EX. Post rotation, it's going to be losing Curlia, which is its main way to kind of like discard energy while also giving it draw power. Brilliant Blender just gives you a way to go, hey, search my deck for 5 psychic energy, get them in the bin. I'm going to accelerate them out with a Gardevoir EX now. So like you can rare candy up to Gardevoir, use this, get the energy in the bin, and you're fine. So it's a great way to kind of give that deck a little bit of legs post rotation. Miracle Headset also being an interesting card to kind of play around with. It's an A spec. It's going to let you put 2 supporter cards from your discard pile into your hand. I'd say this is sort of an upgrade for ancient box decks, so the Raging Bolts, the Roaring Moons we've already talked about. Just a great way to be able to get into your Sawdas turn after turn, so it's like, hey, you've used 2 Sawdas, you haven't found another one, well, you have Miracle Headset, just grab 2 Sawdas back from the discard pile, and you're just going to consistently be able to use that supporter. Helps out into single prize matchups because obviously you're limited to 4 copies of card with the same name, and Miracle Headset's just a great way to guarantee yourself, well, now I have 6 of them effectively. Obviously, Pal Pad does exist, but the fact that that shuffles it back into your deck, whereas this immediately gets it into your hand to be able to use it again, I'd say that this is definitely one worth experimenting with. I'm not going to outright say this is the way that Raging Bolt's going to be played going forward, but it's definitely one worth testing out, that's for sure. But yeah, for the deck upgrades, it's basically just those 5 cards. Did say just Magneton, obviously you do need the pre-evolution in the Magnemite as well. Now, the next cards I want to get into are the ones that are worthwhile techs. I'm going to start off with Shiinotic. Its ability Calming Light makes it so if it's in the active spot, you can put your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep, giving you a little bit of disruption. We did previously have a Mareep with a very similar ability, doing, well, effectively the same thing. I'm saying similar ability because it would have had a different name. That was on a basic with 1 retreat, so a little bit easier to slot into decks. Shiinotic being a stage 1 with 2 retreat does make it a little bit trickier to use, but as a 1/1 line, if you're running high counts of switch, it definitely seems like an interesting inclusion just to make your opponent struggle a little bit to reliably get attacks off. Also getting Victini in this set with Victory Cheer, attacks used by your fire Pokemon, your evolution fire Pokemon specifically, do 10 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. There is the Moltres from Pokemon Go that boosted up basic fire Pokemon's damage by 10, It saw some play just to fix up some numbers, Victini providing that for your evolutions. It could definitely be a good one to hang on to. Probably just grab yourself one copy of this to be safe. Chin Pao. It's basically a reprint of Pumpkaboo. When you play this from your hand onto the bench, you get to discard a stadium in play. So this is a great effect. At the moment, there's not too many scary stadiums. When we had Path to the Peak though, having a way to counter that stadium was pretty important. So Chin Pao bringing something like that back into the format, it's definitely a great card to pick up one copy of just for if you ever find yourself in that situation. Also, the fact that it's a water Pokemon, it's an easy slot into decks that are running Irida. It's like, hey, I need a counter stadium. Cool, grab Chin Pao and grab myself an item. We're good. Obviously, the item could just be a Lost Vacuum, which is like a counter stadium, but Chin Pao is just another option. Also, this isn't going to be rotating. Irida and Lost Vacuum arm. Chin Pao you can get off an Ultra Ball, and you're still good to go. The attack on there, Icicle Loop, 120 damage, bounce and energy back into your hand. It's not bad. If you need a single prize attacking option to get through like EX walls like Mimikyu, definitely helps out for that as well. Magneton coming up in here again. Yeah, it's not just a deck upgrade and something for Pikachu EX, it's also a great tech card. Like, it's just one that if you pull these, or if you're not running Miraidon or Pikachu, I'd still recommend picking up some Magnetons because there's going to be more Lightning Pokemon printed, and there's going to be more reasons that Magneton just becomes better and better as more sets release. Togekiss, great tech card. If you're running Rare Candy in your deck, it's an easy inclusion as a 1/1 line. The ability Wonder Kiss makes it so when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, you get to flip a coin. If it's heads, take an extra prize. Obviously, getting extra prize cards is massive. Like when ADP was in rotation, that thing was dominating. Iron Hands, very threatening card. If you're taking extra prizes off single prizers, it can really skew the matchup. Togekiss, making it so if you take extra prizes ever, you're good. I know I just said Iron Hands off single prizers, taking extra prizes. It does it whenever it knocks anything out. It's just more often than not. It's just like, hey, knock something out that it's hitting for weakness or like a pre-evolution. This is just anytime you're knocking anything out and you can use bigger attacks to do it, you might get an extra prize. So yeah, really like this card. Smoochum, great option for Psychic decks. The attack on here, Delightful Kiss, lets you search your deck for 2 basic Psychic energy and attach them to one of your bench Pokemon. It's free and it has free retreat. So yeah, definitely a great option to have and an amazing tech card to include in your collection. Latias EX is going to make it so your basic Pokemon have no retreat cost. There's a lot of decks that are really going to love this card. I would highly recommend picking yourself up a copy. And Terrapagos, I kind of went back and forth on this one. I was like, is it rogue? Is it just like it might be good, or is it a tech? And I'd argue that it is a tech because it does give you some other options when playing decks. Like the Pikachu, we said, I'll run it with Magneton. Magneton gives up a prize, and you're not using that until the second turn of the game. Terrapagos gives you an option that if you're going second, you can use the attack Prism Charge, search your deck for 3 basic energy of different types, and attach them to your Terra Pokemon in any way that you'd like. So I feel like it gives some decks a lot of potential, like the Stellar Pokemon, the Pikachus, the Hydreigons, all those guys. They're attacking with 3 different energy types, so Terrapagos is a way to charge them up. Obviously, they need to be evolved up, so I think it's more so one that works with like basic Terra Pokemon more than anything. And yeah, I'd say it's a great tech to be able to hang on to. The attack on there, 100 damage for 3 energy, that's not great. You're using it for Prism Charge, and that's pretty much it. Brilliant Blender coming up in here. Again, it's not just limited to a deck upgrade, it is also just an amazing tech card to have. I would highly recommend picking up a copy for your collection. And Call Bell, you can only use this card if you go second and only on the first turn of the game. So kind of like Battle VIP Pass, but one-sided. You get to search your deck for a supporter card though, instead of basic Pokemon, and just pop it into your hand. So for decks that really want to hit a supporter card turn 1, yeah, Call Bell seems good. The main one that I'm thinking of is like Raging Bolt, just giving you an extra card that says, find me a Sada. Perfect. Is it going to be played in every single deck? Maybe not, but there will be situations where it's like, I just want to run 4 copies of Call Bell to make sure I'm always hitting a supporter turn 1. And then mid to late game, this just becomes Ultra Ball fodder, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Counter Gain is a reprinted tool card we're getting back. If you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the attacks used by this Pokemon cost 1 colorless energy less. There's going to be a lot of decks that really like using this. It's effectively just bonus energy acceleration when you're behind on prizes. So with the amount of decks currently running Dusknoir and Dusclops, where you're putting yourself behind on prizes, if you have attackers that have colorless energy in their attack cost, great. Like you're in control of when you're behind, and then it's going to help you get back ahead because you're able to use attacks a little bit quicker. Like Hydreigon. You noticed there was 3 energies of a different type and a colorless in there. Check a counter gain on there. Use a Dusknoir, put 130 on a Charizard EX, then use the attack that does 200, mill 3 cards from their deck, and you're taking a knockout. And then it's like, oh, I was briefly behind on prizes, but it's because I chose to be, and now I'm ahead and your deck's broken. Great. There's going to be more situations like that as well. Blood Moon, Ursaluna EX, Radiant Charizard as examples. As you go down on prizes, their attacks get cheaper. This is just going to speed up the rate that happens. Yeah, I'm sure you guys can think of other situations where those will come up as well. Cyrano, a great new supporter in the set. Search your deck for 3 Pokemon EX, reveal them, pop them into your hand. So it's sort of like an updated Adventurer's Discovery. Bit of a niche supporter, but there will be decks that want to run this, like Ogerpon as an example. Just get yourself 3 Ogerpons, put them on the bench. Charizard EX could potentially even run this, like grabbing yourself a Pidgeot, a Charizard, maybe another Charizard or another EX that you're running in your deck. There'll be a lot of situations where this will be good. I'm not going to say it's going to be like a 4-of card. It's probably just a 1 or 2 copy to have in your collection, but there will be situations where this comes up. And Gravity Mountain. New stadium card. Each stage 2 Pokemon in play has 30 less health. It's effectively a damage modifier without doing any extra damage. So that's pretty cool. And we're also getting Lively Stadium. Each basic Pokemon in play gets 30 extra HP. So effectively the inverse of Gravity Mountain. That's nice. Bulky basics get bulkier. Have a Bravery Charm, have a Lively Stadium, and yeah, a little intimidating. And we're also getting another supporter card, Surfer. You get to switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, you draw until you have 5 cards in hand. So switching, great effect. Drawing cards, great effect. Put them together, that's pretty sick. I don't think you'd be running this in like high counts in decks. There is some decks where you obviously want to be pivoting things around, like Iron Valiant EX. This would be a great new supporter for that. But just for other things where it's like, hey, I want to switch, but I want draw support. I can't cut a research, I can't cut a switch. Find a happy medium, put a copy of Surfer in there. So it gives you some flexibility in that. Terra Orb, new Pokemon search, but it is limited to just Terra Pokemon. So this is, I'm kind of viewing it as a tech. I'm not viewing it as a staple, mainly because it's only getting your Terra Pokemon. So we'll use Charizard EX as an example again. It's getting your Charizard in that deck. It's not getting your Pidgeot or your basics or anything like that, right? Like you can't find your Rotoms, your Luminions. So it's nice to kind of have if you need that extra search, but it's like if you're not maxed out on copies of Nest Ball and Ultra Ball already, I wouldn't include Terra Orb. If you have space, 1 or 2 copies of this is great because it's a way to search out. Like you could use Arven for Terra Orb and a tool card, and then you don't even need cards to discard. Like if you're going Arven for Ultra Ball 2 things away, find a Charizard. It's a little bit more costly, right? Because you're having to have those cards in hand to ditch to get into that piece. Whereas if you're just grabbing Terra Orb, you're just instantly into it. So it's like 1-of copy I think would be good. I don't think it's going to be run in high counts. That's my personal opinion on it though. So that's the list of all the tech cards that I would say, and roughly the counts I'd say go for. I know I said Surfer would likely just be a 1 or 2-of, but I think it's just a good supporter. There's going to be situations where it is used as a 4 count. Everything else in there though, these are the rough counts of what I would think you should pick up for your collection. Now, the next cards we're going to go into are the ones that they could be good. Like these are the cards that if you pull it from a pack, I'd say hang on to it. I'm not going to say run out the door, pay full price for these. It's like if you're going to League week after week and you happen to pack these, don't chuck them in the bulk pile. Rabsca, so it has the attack triple draw 3 cards. Reason I'm reading that is because it says triple and branding. The real reason we're talking about this card is because the attack counter turn, which does 40 base damage, and if there are 3 or fewer cards in your deck, 200 more. So 240 for 1 energy on a single prize Pokemon. That's pretty cool. Now, the reason I'm talking about Rabsca though isn't just for that attack, it's also because post-rotation, Manaphy is going to be rotating. Right? So we're not going to have bench protection in a basic Pokemon. If you want bench protection, you might have to be running a Rabsca, which is obviously a stage 1. So you're going to be running the Rellor and the Rabsca that provides bench protection, as well as protection from effects. Then including this is kind of just an easy shoe-in, right? It's like, well, I already have the Rellor in there for the bench protection. Why not run this one to have a backup attacker? Then yeah, seems like a great idea to me. Obviously very, very situational. You would have to include something like Luminous Energy in most decks to be able to pay for the grass attack cost, or if you're already running grass because you've got like Pikachu and it needs grass energy, or you're just running a grass deck, then you're great. But the other thing is, it's most likely you probably have a Luminous Energy, at least 1 or 2 copies to be able to use this guy. Wu Chen, similar attack on here. If you're down to 3 cards, gets an extra effect. Normally just doing 20 damage with Hazardous Greed, but if there's 3 or fewer cards, you're going to do 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it could be a great way to just like take out 2 low HP pre-evolutions to close out a match. Obviously just aggressively drawing through your deck to get to this point, but late in the match, a lot of the times you're down pretty thin anyways. It's like, well, I'm just gonna go research, deck myself out, snipe 2 things. Yeah. Obviously this one needing a grass and a colorless, so a little bit trickier to pay for. You're likely just running it in decks that actually have grass energy. Same logic could apply though. You could use Luminous Energy and something else to pay for that colorless energy on there. But yeah, I think there'll be times where this comes up, but it's one of those things of like, if you pack this card, I'd say hang on to it. I'm not saying rush out the door and buy it. Paldean Tauros, having the attack Spirited Tackle, does 90 base damage, then 90 more damage if it's hitting a stage 1 Pokemon. So it could be useful. I feel like this is one of those cards that it's mostly just very situational. So if Arch Alodon EX, if Dialga V-Star, actually, I don't know if Dialga V-Star is counted as a stage 1. Maybe that's not a great example. But if Arch Alodon EX and Goldango EX start seeing more of the meta share, this could be a great way to answer into them. You're hitting them for weakness, you're doing 180, doubles up to 360, you're taking them out. Double colorless energy and a fire to deal with it, or to get the attack off. So it is one of those things of like 1 basic fire energy, and if your deck's able to accelerate other energy out, you're good. Or a DTE and a fire energy gets it online, or yeah, Luminous Energy and 2 energy if you're able to accelerate stuff out. Very situational, but it could be a good tech card if, yeah, stage 1 decks that happen to be weak to fire start becoming relevant. Ho-Oh, also a potentially good one, mostly just in here as like a Mimikyu answer if they're running like Bravery Charms or Hero's Cape on it, obviously giving it a lot more HP. You need to do a bit more damage. Shining Blaze does 100 base damage, but if you have a Terra Pokemon on your bench, 100 more damage, so it gets up to 200. So it's just like a good option for fire decks to be able to shred through walls, right? Like we know there's a Sylveon coming up that doesn't take damage from EXs. So Ho-Oh could be a good way to kind of get through that for you. Scavillion EX, it's kind of a rogue deck. I want to like this card. I do like this card. I'm just not going to recommend that everybody picks it up if like it's competitively viable. It could be good though with the right build. So double type makes it a fire and grass Pokemon. So you'd be hitting weakness into Charizard, which is pretty relevant, and you'd be hitting weakness into those steel types we just talked about. Also really cool. The attack on here, Spicy Rage, does 10 base damage, then 70 more damage for every damage counter on this. So effectively like 2 Magma Basins to get the energy onto it. You've got 4 damage on there. You're doing, what, 290? You're taking out V-Star Pokemon. That's pretty cool. Use a damage pump, get some more on there. Take out anything in the format. Yeah, very interesting card. I just don't know that it's going to be able to set up reliably enough to justify it. Like Zoroark V-Star was a really cool card because every guy on your bench is damaged, scales up. This, you need to get all the damage specifically on Scavillion, and Zoroark had a V-Star power letting you draw more cards. This doesn't have a V-Star power on it. It's just got, hey, I've got 2 types. So you're gonna have to use like a bunch of supporters, find a bunch of ways to move damage counters around. There's potential there. I'm just not gonna say it's like a top tier deck potential. It's probably like B to C tier. Nothing wrong with that. It'll be a fun deck regardless, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's like competitively viable necessarily. Paldean Tauros, again showing up in here. The attack on here, Up Thrusting Horns, does 30 base damage, and you put 2 energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, if they're a stage 2, into their hand. So could be very disruptive into Charizard EX, Dragapult EX. There'll be some other stage 2s coming out and becoming relevant as the game progresses. Yeah, could be disruptive, kind of like a new aggro control deck could come out with this. Maybe? If you pull it, I'd say hang on to it. But yeah, don't run out the door to go pick up some copies. Black Kyurem, similar thing, very situational. 3 colorless energy to use Ice Age, does 90 base damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon's a dragon Pokemon, they're paralyzed. It's pretty disruptive, forces them to evolve through or switch out to get past the paralysis, or they just don't attack that turn. And then you can use Black Frost the following turn, doing 250 damage. Does do 30 damage to itself, but like if you're going 90 and then 250 following it up, you're hitting what, 340? Yeah, you're taking out anything in the format. So yeah, really cool combo piece to be able to go into. Could be great for like Chin Pao also, because Chin Pao normally to do around 250 damage. You're needing the same amount of energy, I believe. You scale up by 60, so it'd be what? If you had 4, you get up to 240. Okay, so you're doing slightly more with Kyurem, and you don't have to discard the energy. Yeah, that's good. Obviously, Chin Pao can scale up past that, though. Kyurem has a point where it stops. So it's like a good one-off copy. I don't think it's a deck in and of itself. It's just a great potential tech card for water decks. Whaleren, also another like rogue potential deck in here. Frigid Fangs does 60 base damage, and during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon that have 2 or less energy attached can't attack. So you'd obviously run this with like heaps of energy disruptions, like Giovanni's Charisma, bouncing an energy from your opponent into their hand and accelerating an energy to your Whaleren. Seems pretty good. Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer. There's also cards that like punish your opponent for putting energy onto their things, like the Blizzard one, Calamitous Snowstorm or something like that. If they attach an energy to a basic that isn't a water Pokemon, they take damage, and then yeah, you just bounce damage or bounce energy back into their hand or discard their energy and keep hitting them with Whaleren. Yeah, definitely an interesting potential. But there's a lot of decks that are just able to rush out a bunch of energy, right? Like Charizard EX, they pair into this, they just go, okay, when I evolve up, I'm putting all 3 fire energy onto my Charizard and manually attaching for turn to the Charizard. So I'll just knock out your Whalerens before they're able to get rid of all my energy and get back online. Yeah, so there's a concept there. I feel like this is good in like single prize formats. Standard, it has potential. I'm just not going to say it's like a competitive level deck. Quaquaval, also a card with potential. Being a water type, currently we do have Irida, so you'd be able to go Irida for Quaquaval and Rare Candy and evolve up into this. Having an ability similar to Bibarel, and Bibarel's about to rotate, so it's great that we do have like a pseudo replacement for it, but we've also got some other options, obviously like Revroom, discard an energy, draw until you have 5, draw until you have 5, draw until you have 6, might be until 6. And then we also have Beautifly, that's just draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. Also a stage 2, but yeah, we have options. The Quaquaval up tempo makes you put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck and then draw until you have 5 cards. So it's kind of like Squovit meets Bibarel. It could be good, and it's definitely helpful to have additional draw support Pokemon. The fact that it's on a stage 2, I feel like kind of hurts this. If your deck's already running Rare Candy though, slotting in as like a 1/1 line wouldn't be the worst idea. Rotom definitely has potential for control decks, so Crushing Pulse, your opponent reveals their hand, discard all item and tool cards you find there. Yeah, I hate that. And then the attack Energy Short does a multiplier of 20 for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's not just like a control focus thing, you could also technically get some attacks off with it. Uxie lets you put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. Combines amazingly with Azelf, who does 10 damage, but then 10 more damage for each damage counter on all of your opponent's Pokemon. So you effectively have a spread attacker for 1 psychic energy that combines amazingly with a guy that does more damage based on how much damage you spread. Scary, and they're both part of the Lake Trio. So there's even, I was going to say the third one in the Lake Trio, but no, I'm not even going to say it's potentially good. We're going to talk about Cofagrigus to combine with those 2. So Law of the Underworld puts 6 damage counters on each Pokemon that has an ability. It does do yours and your opponent's, but the 2 guys we just mentioned don't have abilities, so you're kind of leaning into just like Uxie, do some early game spread, Cofagrigus, do some mid game spread at higher numbers, and then Azelf just like delete the active. Really cool concept for a deck there. Is it going to be competitively viable? Probably not, because people will just play around you. Like in a best of 3 format, they see what you're doing game 1 and it's like, okay, I'm just not going to bench too many things because you're trying to get damage counters out. So until I can knock out that Uxie, I'm just going to have 2 things on my board. And then our Azelf's not doing very much damage. And then the Cofagrigus is like, okay, I'm only going to put 1 thing in play that has an ability. So very cool concept. I just feel like most people would just kind of know how to pilot around it. So I wouldn't say it's competitively viable. Definitely a fun rogue deck to play around with though. Meowstic, also one of those cards, if you pull it, I'd say hang on to it just because the ability Beckoning Call allows you to discard a chill teaser toy from your hand, and then you get to gust up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it's sort of like Boss's Orders, but as an ability. So you still have your supporter for turn to use other utility mechanics or just draw you a bunch of cards. And all you need is Meowstic in play, and then, yeah, that item card in your hand. Obviously, it does take up a decent bit of deck space, but if you have the ways to kind of like maneuver around it, like if your deck is very streamlined in what it wants to do, and it's like, cool, I'm just going to run like a 1/1 Meowstic line and 2 copies of that item. If I get into it, I have free gust. Great. If I don't, not the end of the world because my deck already does what it wants to with the other 56 cards. This is just a nice bonus. So yeah, definitely a card to keep an eye out for. Sylveon EX, also a card with some potential, more on the rogue side though. Magical Charm does 160 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, attacks used by the defending Pokemon do 100 less damage. Obviously they can evolve, it removes that effect, or they just switch out into a new attacker. So it's not like quite as good as something like Goodra, where it attacks, that Pokemon takes 80 less. They could gust around you though, so there's always going to be ways around this. Interesting attack nonetheless though. The second one on there, Angelite, you get to choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, shuffle those Pokemon and all attach cards back into their deck. You can't use this attack turn after turn though, but it means like if your opponent has a Pidgeot EX on their bench, their main attacker in the active, gust their main attacker to the bench, bringing up something like Rotom V, let's just say, and then you use Angelite and you go, okay, your attacker's gone and your Pidgeot's gone. You have to try and reset up. Next turn, I'm just going to use Magical Charm and ideally try and knock something out. Yeah, not bad. Palisand EX, also more on the rogue side. It does have potential though. Sandtomb, 160 base damage during your opponent's next turn. The defending Pokemon can't retreat, so you're locking something in the active. And then you got Barite Jail, which puts damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon until they have 100 HP. That's silly. That means your following turn you can knock out a Dusknoir and knock out something on their bench, or you can gust something up and hit it with Sandtomb. Or you can use Devolution TM and devolve them all to their pre-evolutions that, well, they would get knocked out. I like that. It's also putting damage counters, or no, it's not putting damage, it is put damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon until they have 100 left. So it gets past Manaphy. The only thing that's blocking this would be Toadscroll EX and Rapska. So unless decks start running those, you could pull some shilly shenanigans. Sorry, cat's got my tongue. Trying to do this all in one go. But yeah, you could pull some very silly shenanigans with Barite Jail. Fluttermane could be a great option for Roaring Moon EX. After you use Frenzied Gouging, obviously you do a bunch of damage to yourself. Your opponent could very easily knock you out. But if they don't, you just go into Fluttermane, use Perplexing Transfer. You're going to move all damage counters from one of your benched ancient Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. So effectively healing your Roaring Moon and potentially taking a knockout. Yeah, I really like this card. Probably just a one-off potentially, and it is definitely one that you would have to playtest. So that's why I'm like, if you pull it from a pack, hang on to it. It's not garbage, but you probably only want 1 copy for your collection. Paldean Tauros, again showing up. We did see a fire, a water one, and now we're getting a fighting one. The attack on here, Blocking Stomp, does 90 base damage, and if the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. So if you pair into a deck that is fully reliant on basic attackers, and you see that they've burned through a lot of their switch, cool. Tauros could be a great end game thing to go into and just be like, you can't hit me. You can't attack anymore. I like the concept of it. Is it going to be meta relevant? Maybe. Like it's worth hanging on to 1 copy. Flygon EX. It's also another one of those rogue decks. Reversing Storm does 130 base damage. You switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, so you'd be going into a wall like Mimikyu or Sylveon or potentially even like Milotic, and it's just like your opponent can't hit you now. They have to find a gust to bring up Flygon, try and hit it. 310 HP, so they're not even one-shotting it most of the time. So interesting. Sonic Paradoy. This attack does 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. This attack's damage isn't affected by weakness or resistance. It doesn't get past Terra Pokemon though. So if you're into a matchup with other Terra Pokemon, they are EX Pokemon, so it says it'll do 100 damage to them, but then Terra says, no, you don't hit me on the bench. So Interesting attack. I just wish that it also included this attack's damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or the Terra Pokemon effect. That would have been useful. Arch Aladon EX, as much as I want this card to be good, I think it's going to be B tier. Doesn't mean it's bad. It does have potential. Potentially, you just combine it with something like Dialga V-Star and rush a bunch of energy out to them to use Star Chronos, take a knockout, knock something out with Metal Burst the following turn. Like, that has potential. As a deck in and of itself, I don't think it's quite there. You've got 300 HP into Charizard. They knock out a Dusknoir. They put 130 damage counters on this. Then, because they've gone down a prize, their Charizard's doing 210. They hit you. All up, that's 340. Arch Aladon goes down. You're only doing 220 damage. You can be looping this, though, is kind of the nice thing. Assembly Alloy makes it so when you evolve into this, you get 2 Steel Energy from your discard pile and attach it to one of your Pokemon, or one of your Steel Pokemon, so you're just attaching it to the Arch Aladon. Attach for turn, you can get going. But then it's like, you eat a hit, you Professor Turo this, go into another one, and then, yeah, you've got this Arch Aladon back in your hand. You can slowly set it back up and kind of make that as a loop. But that's the thing, like, if you're not playing a matchup where you're actually able to tank a hit, it's irrelevant. Like, there's a lot of things that can just infinitely scale damage, right? We've got Raging Bolt. They'd be able to one-shot you. Charizard, we just talked about, it's going to be able to one-shot you. And other things are going to find ways to do it too. So as much as I want this card to be good, I think it's a B tier, but it's potentially good. Like, if you pull it, don't throw it away, but I'm not saying it's going to be a top tier card. Alolan Executor EX does have potential for Regidrago V-Star as an attacking option, not in a deck of its own, but Tropical Frenzy does 150 damage. You get to attach any number of basic energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So if you're holding a bunch of energy cards, it's a great way to get a secondary attacker online. The second attack on here, though, Swinging Spin. You flip a coin. If it's heads, knock out your opponent's active basic Pokemon. If it's tails, knock out your opponent's benched basic Pokemon. So if you're into a matchup where they only have basic Pokemon, great. You're taking a knockout regardless. You're playing into something where they have an evolution Pokemon in the active, you really better hope that you get tails and get to knock out one of their bench guys. That's also a basic. Altaria, another option for Regidrago V-Star. Humming Charge, search your deck for 2 basic energy, attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you'd like. That's not really why we're talking about this, because there's a Dragonite that can get 3 energy and does 180 damage when it does it. But Cotton Wings does 100 damage. You get to flip a coin, and if it's hedged during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks. That's not bad. If you know that, like, for example, in Regidrago, you'd use something like Gudra. You do 200 damage, you're taking 80 less damage the following turn. You only need to do a little bit more damage to take a knockout. Like, let's say you're into another Regidrago or you're into Lugia, you have to get up to 280. Then you'd use Cotton Wings to do that other 80 damage. You're doing 100, but it gets you to that 80. And you get to flip a coin, and potentially on the next turn, you're invincible. So it's an interesting idea to play around with. Mousehold, another rogue potential deck. Familia March, search your deck for up to 2 in any combination of Mousehold and Mousehold EX, put them onto your bench, shuffle your deck afterwards. There's a Mousehold EX that when it gets hit, it puts 3 damage counters for each of your Mousehold and Mousehold EX and Tandemaus that are in play. So having this attack that effectively cheats out evolutions means you could have 4 Mousehold or Mousehold EX that you've manually evolved up with Tandemaus, and then you're using this one to cheat out 2 more Mouseholds. Right, because you could have 4 of the EX, 4 of the regular one, a Terra Pokemon on your board, so you could have Area 0 Underdepths in play, and ideally have 8 mice on your board, so that if they hit you, they're taking a bunch of damage, and then you're also hitting them with your own attack afterwards. So interesting concept. Chill Teaser Toy, we talked about this earlier. It's in here for the Meowstic. It does also let you kind of disrupt your opponent a little bit, but you can only use this if you go second and only on the first turn of the game. Put an energy card attached to your opponent's Pokemon into their hand. That's alright. It's mainly in here for Meowstic to be able to gust, but potentially you could use it for disruption. Deduction Kit, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, then put them back in any order or shuffle them on the bottom of your deck. This is one of those cards that is like, if you have a 59 card deck and you want something to slot in, potentially it's this. It's just like giving you that bit of insight that, hey, I'm about to use Professor's Research. What am I drawing into? These 3 cards. Do you want them? Nah, put them on the bottom. Or like I'm about to use Pokestop. Check the cards. Am I going to be discarding supporter cards and energies, or am I getting into items? Oh, it's 2 boss's orders and a research? No, put them on the bottom, then we spin the Pokestop. So it's potentially a good card to have. If you pull it, hang on to it. Situationally, it's good, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend like running out the door to buy these. Dragon Elixir heals 60 damage from your active dragon Pokemon. Could be great for Regidrago if it's copying Gudra's attack, or just great for Gudra. You're going kind of the tankier route, gives you some options. Lycia's Appeal, switch your opponent's bench basic Pokemon to the active spot. If you do, the new active Pokemon is confused. Obviously, a little bit limited. It's kind of like Boss's Orders, but it's only working on basic Pokemon. Still, if you want to be running high counts of Gust, not a bad option. There is a lot of big basic decks running around at the moment. We've got Raging Bolt, we've got Terrapagos, Roaring Moon. Even just getting a pre-evolution, like if you're running 2 copies of Boss and 1 copy of Lycia, yeah, wouldn't be the worst call. Or if you are running 4 copies of Boss and it's like, I want a 5th one, well, you have that option. Potentially you could have 8 now. Meddling Memo. Your opponent counts the amount of cards in their hands, then they shuffle those cards and put them on the bottom of their deck. And then they draw as many cards as they've just done. Or they count it. So they had a 6-card hand, they tell you that, they put it on the bottom of their deck, they get a new 6-card hand. If you have insider information, like your opponent used a Forest Seal Stone, then didn't play that card for some reason, it's like, well, I'm gonna make you put that away. Potentially it's good. I feel like it would mostly just be in control decks, right? So like you use Eerie, you see their hand, you discard all their item cards, then you use Meddling Memo on the following turn when you have like another Eerie, and it's like, well, I know they don't have items because I've seen their hand. And it's like, well, Meddling Memo, cool, now Eerie that new hand. A little bit cheeky, or playing it with that Rotom that gets rid of items and tool cards. Megaton Blower, situational A-spec card. You're going to discard all Pokemon tools and special energies from all of your opponent's Pokemon and discard a stadium card that's in play. It's basically a tool card or an A-spec card that just says, oh, you're playing Lugia? That's a shame. Into a lot of other matchups, doesn't do a lot, so I don't really know that it justifies the A-spec slot, but if you pull it, it's always good to kind of hang on to the A-specs. Most of them come up at some point. Same goes for Miracle Headset. We did talk about this earlier for potentially like ancient decks. If you pull it, hang on to it. As more cards come out, there might be other decks that really want specific supporters turn after turn, so Miracle Headset could help you out there. Precious Trolley lets you search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. If you specifically want a full board of basics for some reason, this could work. Like for Regigigas, you want all your Regis out. Now you have a card that literally says, get all the Regis from my deck now. And Scramble Switch, the A-spec that lets you switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, you can move any number of energy from the Pokemon that moved to the bench to the new active. So if you've accelerated out all your energy onto something and it's like, my eggs are all in this basket, I need to go into a new attacker, keep the energy in play. Yeah, interesting idea to play around with. And Enriching Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it's just a colorless energy, so that's not great. But when you attach it to a Pokemon, you're going to get to draw 4 cards. So for decks that are able to loop themselves, this seems pretty good. Like if you're playing a deck that runs Penny, Penny picks up the basic Pokemon and all cards attached to it. So you're using this just as a colorless energy to pay for something's attack. It eats a hit, you go Penny, pick it up, put it back down, Enriching Energy, draw 4 cards. That's pretty cool. I like that. There's going to be other decks too where like you're bouncing an energy back into your hand, and this is just giving you like card advantage. So yeah, very, very interesting cards. But yeah, these are just ones that it's like, if you happen to pull these, hang on to them. There is a lot of them in this set. So like, yeah, apologies. It did take quite a while to get through that. There is a lot of cards in this set that do seem like they have some pretty solid potential, but are like just shy of the mark. If you pull them from packs though, I'd highly recommend hanging on to all of these though. The next cards we're going to talk about though are the ones for Gym Leader Challenge. Going to quickly fire through these because a lot of them we would have already covered. We're seeing the Shiinotic in there. We're seeing the Rabska, the Wu Chen. So new one we are seeing in here though is the Zarude. So Jungle Whip does 80 base damage, but you do have the option to put all energy attached to this Pokemon into your hand to do 80 more damage. In GLC, we have things like Venusaur that are doubling the amount of energy on a card. And we've also got things like Rillaboom that can accelerate energy out. Effectively, if you had Venusaur in play, 2 grass energy, you'd be able to use Zarude's attack Jungle Whip, and you could just bounce those into your hand. hit 160. Playing it with something like Rillaboom that can accelerate energy back onto this quickly, or even Cherrim to accelerate energy back onto this quickly, definitely makes it a great attacking option. The Skeledirge showing up in here as well. So Skeledirge has the ability Unaware, prevent all effects of attacks used by our opponent's Pokemon done to this. And the attack on here, Torchetto, does 60 base damage, then 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon, yours and your opponent. So it's effectively Palkia V-Star as a single prize attacking option. Also having Scentiscorch in there, Billowing Heatwave does 130 base damage, also does 30 damage to each of your bench Pokemon, but 130 for 1 energy. It's a really quick attacker you can get online, and there is some situations where you don't even mind having damage counters on your own Pokemon. The Whaleren we did talk about earlier. The Cetitan, having Solid Body, takes 30 less damage from attacks, and the attack on here for a Water Triple Colorless does 150 base damage. It's sort of just like another Wailord. We have a Wailord that takes 30 less damage, and it's a pretty good number. So Titan is basically just letting you have another 1/1 line of Wailord in your deck if you are playing water decks in that style. Rotom showing up in here again, great control option. GLC Lightning decks, they can be quite controlling. Togekiss just for some prize advantage, taking extra prizes in GLC is a little bit crazy. The Smoochum and the Lake Trio Cofagrigus showing up in here as well. Did include the Mesprit this time though, having Guardian Burst, 160 base damage for double Psychic, but you can only use this if you have Uxie and Azelf on your bench. If you're including Uxie and Azelf, it's just an easy one-off attacker to slot into your decks. The Tauros showing up again in here. Donphan though, being a new one for us, 120 base damage. You have to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, but during your opponent's next turn, it's going to take 100 less damage from attacks. Landorus having Fist of Focus, doing 30 base damage. You attach an energy card from your discard pile to this Pokemon. Obviously having a lot of ways to manipulate damage in GLC. Yeah, you can get that 30 damage a little bit higher, potentially taking out pre-evolution Pokemon while accelerating energy onto Landorus so that it can use the second attack on here, Buster Swing, doing 130 damage. Not too shabby. Graplock also showing up, having Raging Tentacles, 130 base damage, but if this Pokemon has any damage counters on it, the attack does... Graplock also showing up here, having Raging Tentacles, doing 130 base damage. If this Pokemon has any damage counters on it though, you can use the attack for just 1 fighting energy, so potentially being a quick attacker you could get online if your deck is kind of doing like self-inflicting damage, right? Like if this is sitting on your bench and you use something like Earthquake that hits your own board, cool, Graplock can attack for 1 energy. That's pretty solid. Skarmory just being a great defensive attacker for Steel decks, having Steel Wing, Steel and a colorless energy to do 50 damage. During your opponent's next turn, it takes 30 less damage from attacks. We have things like Full Metal Lab to make you take less damage. We have Iron Helmet, or not Iron Helmet, Pot Helmet, and Metal Frying Pan, making it take less damage. So yeah, you could kind of have Skarmory just as another like defensive option if you're kind of going that route with your Steel decks. For some more defensive things though, Clement's Quick Wit heals 60 damage from each of your Lightning Pokemon. So if you're running into a lot of spread decks and you're running Lightning, there's not a lot of great options that you have. Like there's no bench protection for Lightning. This just gives you a way that it goes, oh, I'm playing into spread. Cool, Clement can just like heal me a little bit. Jasmine's Gaze, similar idea for this, but during your opponent's next turn, all of your Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks, so it's just a great option to play into spread decks or types that don't have bench protection. And also Surfer showing up in here, just a great supporter card, and the new stadiums, 1 copy of each of those would be great for your GLC decks. Now, if you're... Now, the other thing I want to talk about is cards for the budget build battle format, which is the tournament I run over on Limitless every Friday night. Whole idea about it is it's single prize Pokemon, so similar concept to GLC. It's in the standard format though, so a little bit more of a limited card pool. And you're not limited to the types of cards you can run in your deck though. So like if you want to play colorless Pokemon for draw support in your fire deck, you're welcome to do that. The rules of it though is no rule boxes, so EXs, Vs, Radiants, A-Specs, none of that, just focusing on single prize Pokemon, and you can only have 2 copies of a card that have the same name. Special exceptions provided to basic energy, obviously run as many of those as you want, and basic Pokemon, if they evolve up, you can have a couple extra copies. So if it evolves into a stage 1, 1 extra copy allowed of the basic, and if the basic evolves into a stage 2 in your deck, you can have 2 extras of the basic just to help with consistency. So effectively you could be running a 4-2-2 evolution line at the highest, or going for a 4-0-1 evolution line if you did want. For the budget build battle cards from this set though, it's going to be similar to GLC, Obviously, just the card counts can vary a little bit as you can have additional copies, not just limited to one. There is also some cards in here that would be good in budget build battles that wouldn't necessarily be good in GLC. So something like Extra Drill, whose attack Drill Smash does 60 base damage, but if you have any steel Pokemon on your bench, it does 80 more. Getting up to 140 energy or 140 damage for 2 energy, it's pretty good. And because you can run steel Pokemon in the same deck as this, it makes it so you can actually get that online. Some other ones in here being the Flapple and the Appleton, I feel like they'd be pretty good for this format. Melting Sweetness, 50 base damage during your opponent's next turn. The defending Pokemon can't attack. The amount of switch cards that are available in this format is quite limited, unlike in GLC where you do have things like Floatstone, U-Turn Board. There's a lot of ways to just pivot your guys out of the active. In budget build battles, you're limited to what's in the standard format. So it's basically just Switch and now Surfer or hard retreating your guys out. So Appleton's attack would ideally make it so that your opponent's just hard retreating and losing their energy in play, which can be pretty punishing. Flapple also showing up in here does 20 damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon, so spread decks are becoming quite a thing. Frostlass sees quite a bit of play, and the fact that Flapple doesn't have an ability makes it a great partner for Frostlass. You're spreading damage counters onto things with abilities, and then Flapple's just kind of deleting the thing in the active if they've been chipped away a little bit by Frostlasses. Other than that, I feel like most of this is the same as it is in GLC. Lycia's Appeal I did include here just because, well, it's kind of limited for the amount of Gust cards in this format. GLC, you've got Guzma, you've got Boss's Orders. In this, though, we've basically just got Boss's Orders, so having Lycia's as another option, definitely a great inclusion. And also including the Meowstic and Chill Teaser Toy, just because you can run additional copies. In GLC, you can only run 1 copy of that, wouldn't make a lot of sense. The fact that you could be running the Meowstic line and then 2 copies of Chill Teaser Toy for some Gust, definitely a great include for the deck. Now, that's pretty much it for the cards. We'll show you guys a full list of everything, obviously including the alternate format stuff. The buy list gets pretty big, so I will show you guys it with the alternate format stuff in it, and then it with just the standard, as well as the cards that I'm personally going to be buying from this set. Obviously, videos like this, it's kind of done as a recommendation. This isn't a, hey, go and buy every single one of these cards. This is a, these are the things with potential. Look at them. You know your budget. I don't. Pick the cards that fit your play style. Staple cards I'd recommend everybody gets. The tech cards I'd recommend everybody gets. Everything else is pick and choose what you want. Like of the new decks, you don't need to run every single one of them. Of the, hey, they could be good decks. That's a, if it seems interesting to you, pick up those cards. Don't just take this as a, oh, well, triple set it, I have to go buy it. No. Like, use this as a bit of a guide, not as a rule book. But yeah, so for the full list, there's a lot on there. If you're looking to get everything that has any potential in standard and the alternate formats, that's what you're looking at. It's been a while since we've had a buy list this big, I'll be honest. But yeah, with all these single prize attacking options for GLC and budget build battles, it does scale it up quite a bit. So for the cards that would just be good for the standard format, still pretty impressive, I'll be honest. There is a lot of cards with potential. This is if you're looking at playing every deck that seems like it might have legs. That's including things like the Skeledirge, the Whalerinns, the Kyurem, if you're thinking of including that in Chin-Pao. And then this is the cards I'm personally going to be buying. So scaling that down quite a bit. Skeledirge, I think the concept of it is really cool. I like decks that scale up damage based on bench sizes, so I'm going to experiment around with that. There's also the Skeledirge EX to help boost up your damage output, so I really enjoy that. Cerulege EX seems like a really fun concept, effectively a bin it to win it style, so all for that. And Milotic being an attacking wall, really like that. Including the Magnetons, just because as more lightning attackers come out, I think there'll be more decks that open up. Pikachu EX though, I'm likely not buying into that, to be completely honest, but if that's a deck you want to play, 100% go for it. Hydreigon, I like it. It seems like a cool card, so I'm going to be including that. But yeah, you're noticing this is obviously quite scaled down from that full list, and I'd recommend you do the same. Look at the cards from the set. You've just watched the full video, so you have an understanding of what's coming out and what has potential, and then just adapt this to fit your personal playstyle. I hope that you guys found this video helpful. If you did, hitting that like button to let me know is always appreciated, and subscribe to keep up with the shenanigans. But till next time, stay golden, you Goombas.